Okay, all right.
Here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. It's baseball drama day is what today is.
Really?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
What kind of drama are we talking about?
We're talking about the selfish kind of drama.
Oh,
yeah.
jeez.
You know, it's just, okay, I'll say this. Football is king in America still at the high school level. And
Yeah.
which makes football coaches feel like, monarchs.
Yes.
Big
man on campus, so to speak.
Yeah, big man on campus. Exactly.
Right.
Speaking of monarchs, what do you think of Oprah?
She probably is our monarch. That, or actually, no, I wouldn't dare disrespect Queen Bee. So there is that too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Man,
Oprah, man.
Well,
she's had a busy few weeks here.
Yeah, usually we reverse the order, but it's a good segue, I think.
Yeah,
like
let's just
I
do
came home the other day and like I was like, why is Oprah on my television? I was like, and my wife and my daughter are glued to the TV watching this interview between Harry and Meghan and why they left the royal family. And I'm like, why do we care that they left the royal family? Why is this even why is this even this isn't even like this has nothing to do with even our country.
No.
Other than the fact that they live in California now.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like, why do we care about this? Does this happen in your house
at all?
Yeah,
it has actually. It was funny. Nathaniel and I came home and our wives were watching it as well, and we were like, I gotta say, I got sucked right in, man. I'm such a sucker for that stuff.
But why?
I don't know. It just was on.
Do you remember when Diana died?
I remember the night Diana died.
You remember all that?
Yes, I was probably in second grade, I think, and my grandmother was watching us.
You were in what grade?
It doesn't matter.
What did you say? Second grade?
Second grade. It was 1998, right?
That's it.
I'll just walked out of the room. For those of you who aren't watching, I remember it, and my grandmother was watching my brother and I, and she was so sad. I mean, I could tell something bad happened because there was news footage of cars and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I was a little like shocked that so many people were sad. Yeah, I mean, someone died, and that's always sad, of course. But
it's not always sad.
Well, yeah, I guess
it's not always.
I guess not. I guess not. All right, Pastor Coleman.
I'm just saying. I mean, nobody shed a tear when Osama bin Laden got
Okay, that's true. You're right. All right. Yeah, that's.
I mean, somebody dies every 4 seconds in this country.
That's true,
so
right.
It's like,
that's true.
How sad are you right now?
Not that sad.
Not that sad.
No.
So I'm just saying, it's not always sad.
Okay. All right. I acknowledge that is true. Yes.
So
but
why
everyone
were we
was sad
so
about
sad about that one?
Yes. Well, that one was tragedy. I mean, it was like a tragic way that she died.
Being chased by the paparazzi.
Exactly. Yeah, like a car related incident, and so that in and of itself was sad. And I honestly don't really know much more about her life beyond that. I gotta say, I don't know anything about.
I remember the funeral.
Yeah,
because it was on. You couldn't turn on television without it being on.
Yep.
And so I remember Harry and what's his brother's name? Was it Philip?
William?
Yeah. I'm just making up British sounding names now.
Yeah, basically.
Is Rupert? What's his name? I'm sorry.
Just listing the most mayonnaise names you can think of.
Wendell?
George? I don't know. I think George is their son.
It's Edward, right?
Anyways, I think it's William and Harry.
I just remember I remember how little they were, and that was sad.
Yes.
Just seeing them have to parade and make a spectacle of their mother's wedding. I was like, just leave them alone.
I know, seriously. Yeah.
And so now he's like a grown man.
Yeah. Making his own decisions.
Making his own decisions. So for those of you that don't know, they have left the royal family.
They have departed.
They've departed for California.
They've gone the way of the Yank.
That's right.
Yeah.
To the disgrace of an entire nation.
Yeah.
And leveling some pretty hefty accusations on the way out.
They did, yes. Yes.
What do you know about that?
Well, my very limited knowledge in my 10 minutes watching the interview,
The Oprah special.
Yeah, that they left because they felt mistreated by the royal family, particularly.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think Meghan Markle was the subject of that.
A lot of it having, allegedly, a lot of it having to do with the fact that she's biracial.
Right.
And,
yes. And then I think Harry, as her husband, being frustrated with that treatment, and so therefore deciding it's in their best interest to make a life for themselves separate from the royal family.
Yeah.
So they went to America and are attempting to do that.
America.
Yeah. At Tyler Perry's house, apparently.
Yeah. They've adapted to American life well.
Yes.
Whenever they go somewhere, he always just says, "Let's rock and roll."
Yeah.
That's
in his accent. Yeah.
That's right. Let's rock and roll.
We're like,
hell.
This is definitely the nonsense portion. We're like the least qualified people. We barely know the names of the people involved. But anyways, it is
Wendell.
It is fascinating to me though that we care so deeply about.
Why? Well, I mean, what do you think? I
well-
mean, that's not rhetorical. I really want to know why. Why do you?
So-
why do you think we give a rip about this stuff?
No, why do we care that? The other story that was big was like not this big, but like Lady Gaga's dogs got stolen
Yeah.
at gunpoint, and everyone's like, the dogs are okay. It's like, what about the dog walker?
Oh
He
my
like got
gosh,
shot
seriously.
or something, I think. And I think we just have this fascination with celebrity, and we've talked about this in other contexts on the podcast.
But I think the royal
and-
family's like distinct. Like the
It is
royal
distinct,
wedding
yes.
was a big thing.
Yeah.
This thing is a big. It's
So-
always
yeah.
been a big thing.
So I
in
think there's
American
layers
culture.
to that, right?
Yeah.
Like number one is they're well known, so there's that.
Yeah.
But I do think, and the article you sent me about this actually tapped into something I hadn't quite put together in my brain, which was
Like we have a historical connection.
that's right. We're connected to them in a very, very real way, in a very bloody way, in a very contentious way. And so I think there's something, all that conflict aside, there's something that we are connected as nations, in an unmistakable way. And so while it doesn't really have anything to do with us in the way that it affects our lives, there's something to be said about the tradition and the, Britain's had its influence across the world, whether good or bad, depending on how you want to look at it. But
Well, one of the things that the article said is like storytelling is a big deal, I think, to us as people.
Yeah.
But specifically, the addendum that I would make to that is that I think we really like storytelling of this high regard is like almost fantastical. Like it's like Game of Thrones. It's like, all of a sudden now we're like dealing with princesses and princes. And so now all of a sudden we're captivated in what every bedtime story and, fantasy we've ever been taught is about princes and kingdoms and monarchies. And also all of a sudden it's like playing out in real life, even though they hold no real power anymore,
Yeah, well, and how many of those stories too are like, this is the rule, this is the tradition, and then one of the children goes, not me, I'm gonna go do my own thing, for whatever reason, depending
rebellion.
depending on the Disney movie or fantasy movie of your choice, it's for different reasons. But I mean, that's playing out right now, and I think that it does tap into something within each of us that wants to kick against maybe what we're used to or how we grew up or whatever the case may be. So
I think we like this article in the Wall Street Journal. Let me quote it. It says, and I quote, "We get the benefits, the pictures, the clothes, the castles, the horses, the military outfits, the stories of backstairs and love affairs, but England's paying the bills."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we get all the stories. So we
right.
get to participate in all of this, but we don't really have to deal with the fallout and the problems of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is truly like a fantasy in that it doesn't affect our lives. It's a drama of royal proportions, but it is something we can observe and comment on without it actually affecting you and me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think, I guess if you're going to layer gospel stuff on it, like, I mean, I feel like I don't want to like overreach on this, but man, oh man, like, it's not that far to get to, well, let's see, we're interested in a kingdom with a monarch.
Yep.
And this story is about their children rebelling from that monarchy and leaving that kingdom. And will they find their way back eventually?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so like this is teed up
for sure. Totally. It is, definitely
for a pastor.
Yeah, it's an underhand lob for sure. Yeah. I think even in our day and age where a lot of that royal language feels very antiquated and not really applicable, there's still and even as autonomous independent Americans, like there's still something within us that recognizes that that's how life has worked throughout most of history, is under some sort of and we still have the president or whatever, but it's not the same. Like you don't bow to the president, you don't like the tradition isn't the same. It's not the same at all. And so I think there is something within us that's still, whether we like it or not, sort of fascinated by that.
We are. Like my wife said to me the other day, she's like, oh man, like she saw the pictures of England during that, and she's like, oh man, I still would really like to vacation there. And I was like, all right, okay, we should go to an English restaurant first.
I'm just imagining.
And she's like, what? And I was like, oh, that's right. Those don't exist because their food is awful. Why would you're just getting caught up in this stuff. Right. What are you doing? I was like, oh, the beaches there are, oh no, wait, it's always raining there. Why would we want to go there when we can go to like Italy?
Yeah. It's really close.
It's really close, except it's awesome.
I just imagine your vacation with Shanna would be like, you go there for 2 weeks. She'd go like ride the bus, do all the stuff, and you just be like in a cigar shop. Like
that's all I would do. That's right. I would
surrounded in a closet.
An English pub. Yep. Maybe their alcohol. That's right. What you would be going there for.
Basically.
And even then, you could just go up the road to Ireland, and that would be better.
That would be better. Yes. So
I don't know. In my opinion.
In your humble opinion. Yes.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah.
And man, I don't know. I think Americans, we're so distinctly American. And this is also like staring through the looking glass or the window, or like window shopping at other cultures that we've heard about and read about.
Right.
And, and it's like, I think maybe a little bit of escapism in some ways. But we're like, we don't want that here.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I do think, without going too far into it, like it's been a very racially tense year. And that is what they're claiming the royal family did, was that their main grievances against them were race related. And so I think that, for better or worse, people are drawn to that kind of stuff this year, especially
this year. Yeah.
And so,
well, I mean, speaking of being distinctly American, that brings us to your topic.
Yeah. My light fodder for discussion today.
Your light fodder. Seriously, man.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I'm thinking of doing.
Okay, do tell me.
So I found this article.
Andrew's kind of, you could be a prince. Andrew.
Prince Andrew?
There
was a Prince Andrew.
That's what I'm saying. Nathaniel, not so much, but Andrew.
According to my parents, that's one of the two sources for my name, was Prince Andrew.
Forget
Not because he's
I don't know. You know what? Just go.
Will it help if the other one was because it's a biblical name?
No, that'd make it worse. Okay. I'm tired of it. Stop naming your kids after Bible characters.
All right. I didn't follow that tradition.
It's like, I don't know any, Judases.
No.
I don't know.
Funny how that one never caught on.
Okay, that one obviously. How about Melchizedek?
That's right.
That was an awesome person, but no one's taking that name.
No, just Mel.
Mel.
No.
We could do Mel. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. I was trying to find something that was actually, that wasn't this, and that wasn't vaccines. So, but this just popped up, and the title
succeeded.
The title was very provoking, which was "America Without God," and it was written by a guy named Shadi Hamid in a
very liberal newspaper, but yet somehow very balanced.
So why
I was shocked by that.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, the Atlantic, so knowing what we're getting into.
Yeah.
But I read it because the title grabbed me, and I got to say that it articulated a lot of things that I have been thinking and processing over the past year, and so I wanted to highlight 4 portions and just talk about them with you.
Awesome.
That's because this topic is too big for one podcast, so all I want to do is bring up a few good points he made, and let's talk about them. So there's one quote that I really liked. This is my first point. He says,
so what's the thesis of the article in general?
So the thesis of the article, so I'll just read his subtitle or sub-summary, which is, as religious faith has declined in America, ideological intensity has risen, which is very true. Will the quest for secular redemption through politics doom the American idea?
And then one of the things he highlights at the beginning is that we were holding steady at 70% church attendance forever as a country.
Yes.
And then we had the sharpest decline in church attendance in history in the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
So
what he's looking at is what happened to that.
Yeah.
That energy, that effort, that intention that went towards church going. Yeah. Whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Why is that going down, and what's taken its place? Yeah. And so that's kind of what he's trying to get at.
Okay, got it.
So the first quote I highlighted was this, and this was early on in the article. He says, as Christianity's hold in particular has weakened, ideological intensity and fragmentation have risen. American faith, it turns out, is as fervent as ever. It's just that what was once religious belief has now been channeled into political belief. Political debates over what America...
Minds.
Oh, man, you got it too.
Yeah.
Debates over what America is supposed to mean have taken the character of theological disputations. This is what religion without religion looks like. And I wrote next to that religion without Jesus or God is a better way to put what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so that would really grab me, and it made me wonder then, how does the church fit into that then, or not fit into that? As we have this decline, and as we have this fragmentation, I think the puzzle, and I think that's why this year has been so divisive in Christianity, Christendom, whatever, is because we're trying to fit into that.
Yeah, man, I'm going to have some thoughts on this that just go against the mainstream kind of Christian answer on this. Yeah. And it's just what I kind of feel deep in my bones at this point. And maybe 10 years from now, I'll listen back to this and be like, oh man, I've said some terrible things. But it's how I feel right now, which is, every person that I respect and love says that we have a responsibility to be involved in politics and in the public forum on this issue, okay? I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think it's true. I think it's been true.
Right.
But I think right now, I think there's no way for us to do it without adding to the political noise and the polarization.
Yes.
I don't think there's a way to do it. Yeah. So I think that churches have to be staunchly non-political and really, really good at the gospel so that every voice can hear. Yeah. Because as soon as you enter into politics as a church or a pastor, I'm just telling you, that might work in Nashville. Right. But here in the Bay Area near San Francisco, there's no way for me to do that without me ending up on somebody's shit list. It's just not possible.
Right. And that's actually what I wrote down. What I wrote down was we grab a political idea to hold on to relevance. And I think that really happened this year. On the right or the left, you see churches like, okay, people don't care about the gospel, but they do care about this thing. And so I'm going to grab onto traditional values, or I'm going to grab onto whatever definition of social justice and try to fit, the gospel on top of those things. Instead of starting with the gospel and seeing what it has to say about both of those things.
And as these topics come up, and we teach what the Bible has to say to them, other than trying to shoehorn them into some sort of framework, which is what raises everybody's antenna and radar. Yeah. Like last night, I had my men's group around my house last night. Someone came to the group and they were like, they brought up the topic of same-sex attraction. They were like, I don't want to talk about this, but it's one of the things. This is the topic that I struggle with the most, but I don't want to talk about this. And that, my personality, what that turned into.
A discussion.
That's all we talked about. Right. Yeah,
people should learn not to say that around you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, no, you don't want to talk about this because no one has been able to talk about this except in a binary way.
That's right. Yep.
So let's talk about this subject in a way that is willing to live in the tension a little bit more. Yeah. In other words, argue for a biblical position of sexuality, but also deal with the implications of trying to live that out as human beings in relationship with the human beings that are behind these topics.
Yeah, 100%.
If we can figure out how to have conversations like that, both in the pulpit and in people's private homes, there's no way to become political as a church or a pastor in this setting, in our context at this time. That's just how I feel right now, man.
I having grown up here, I could not agree with you more. I mean, we have to do, in a place like this, we have to do the work of relationship in order to have any hope of weaving the gospel into people's lives. You know, we have to preach, we have to have, firm convictions about what the Bible says, but that has to be woven into people's lives through understanding where they're coming from and what they're experiencing and how the gospel applies to those things. And the only way to do that is to talk about it with people. Yeah. And so, the tidy answers don't do a lot.
Well, that's exactly right. And listen, I care a lot. What I'm not saying is that we become apolitical.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Christians don't care about what happens in the world and that they don't care about how these things impact our community, our society, our freedoms, so to speak. Right. We should care deeply and tremendously about those things. But we're going to have to, I have a church. Yeah. I am in relationship with that church. My responsibility is to get them to be thinking Christians about all of these topics, independent from the larger meta-political narrative that they tend to be attached to.
That's right.
And the only way to do that is to, in my opinion, is to just, one, be willing to have these conversations in relationship. And if you're going to preach them, as the Bible brings them up as part of the biblical narrative.
That's right.
So that they're attached to that framework, and it's clear they're attached to that framework, not something that you arbitrarily imposed into your preaching or whatever.
Yeah. You preached a sermon around the election cycle, and it was called The Political Sermon That Most Americans Will Hate. I think that was the title, something like that. And what I walked away from that sermon being really appreciative of is, man, people may not philosophically agree with that, with the things you said.
Yeah.
But they're going to have a really hard time making a biblical case against what you said.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved about that.
And sermon. That's, to me, that's a high compliment, because that's, I don't know. So part of my personality wants everyone to be uncomfortable.
Right.
And then there's a whole another part of my personality that wants to help people find comfort.
Yeah.
And those two things seem mutually exclusive, but they're not.
They're not.
Because the only way to get to a more comfortable place in this world is to plow over all the things that you think are making you comfortable.
That's right.
And the ideas and the political structures and the ideologies and all that,
Yeah, 100%.
And that's kind of why, that's exactly what Jesus, got himself killed over, which was he wanted to make people uncomfortable because they were too comfortable in the wrong things.
Yeah, for sure. It's you think this is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to tell you that it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
What's the next one?
All right, the next one.
That was good. That was a good way to.
Yeah. The next one, he quotes a guy named Abraham Kuyper.
He's hanging on my wall in my office.
Seriously?
Yeah, if you look at the couch I normally sit on.
Yeah.
Yeah, right behind me, that's Abraham Cupier.
Oh, I had no idea. That's
He's
cool.
Old reformer, baby.
Dang. Well, shows what I know. Jeez. He's
the Dutch theologian.
That's cool. Well, he's a smart guy because he said this. He argued that all strongly held ideologies were effectually faith-based, that no human being could survive long without some ultimate loyalty. If loyalty didn't derive from traditional religion, it would find an expression through secular commitments such as nationalism, socialism, or liberalism. I love that.
I love it too, because I think he's kind of tapping into something that we've said around here.
Mm-hmm.
You were creating, as Harold Best says it,
mm-hmm.
unceasing outpouring.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when it comes up in a sermon, I think people kind of can glaze over that statement.
Yes.
But like all he's trying to say is like, you're an image bearer.
Mm-hmm.
You image the one true monarch, the high king of the universe. That's who you image. Okay. Well, God is constantly pouring himself out as a creator, mm-hmm. which means you are constantly pouring yourself out as his creation. Now, the question is not if you're doing that.
Right.
It's what.
It's what.
What are you pouring yourself out for?
Mm-hmm.
It's either going to be for him
mm-hmm.
or for something else.
Yeah.
Not you're in other words, you're always worshiping. Mm-hmm. You are a worshiper.
Yep.
It's not when.
Mm-hmm. It's
not if.
Yeah.
It's what.
Mm-hmm.
What are you worshiping? And I think that's what Cupier is trying to say here.
Yes.
Is like, if you're not, if you abandon, the gospel and your first love, then it's not like that desire just ends.
Yeah.
You're going to pour yourself out for something, and that's what's happening in American politics right now.
Yeah. And that's a really uncomfortable idea for people, because it's like, I want to divorce my life of worship. Like that's something that you church people, religious zealots do. I have affinities, I have opinions, I have convictions, but I don't worship. And it's
look at this last year, man. Who would you say the zealots are right now? The zealots are not going to be not the religious people anymore. It's the political people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's because their God is their president or their politician or their candidate. Right? They have prophets who sit in Senate seats and House committees. And they have laws, and they have ideologies, and they have gospels that they preach to salvation.
Yeah, 100%. I thought this was really cool too, because right after that he quotes another guy, a theorist named Samuel Goldman, who calls this idea the law of conservation of religion, where in any given society there's a relatively constant and finite supply of religious conviction. What varies is how and where it's expressed. And if. Yes. How?
But how and where.
So it's like this amount of religious conviction in a given community or nation, and it's like that has to be expressed somehow. I thought that was such an interesting idea. And it's like, how is it going to be
And that's
expressed?
exactly what the Bible has told us since it was revealed to us.
That's
right? That's the beginning of Romans 1, right? They exchanged that worship for the lie. That's the Romans 1 language. They exchanged the truth for a lie, and they're worshiping creation and not the creator. That's the whole language of the opening book of Romans 100%. Is what this article is saying.
All these commentators are kind of coming to the same conclusion. That's why I love it. It's like such a thoughtful way to think about it. Like, and he goes on to say that it's, instead of it being more unified, like when we were more church going, quote unquote, now it's fractioned. Conservatives believe they're faithful to the American idea, and that liberals are betraying it. But liberals believe with equal certitude they're faithful to the American idea, and that conservatives are betraying it. So you have this amorphous bubble of conviction, of religious conviction that has to be used somehow.
Well, and the other thing that
he's getting split into two against each other.
And the other thing that he's pointing out is, like, typically the way that you bridge that is through a common enemy.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Which is a weaker gospel, for the record.
Totally.
We don't want a common enemy. we want a common king.
Well,
we
and
want a common savior. That's such a better gospel.
Yeah, and it's
know?
also I mean you can look back on history and see that that's true. Like
9/11, we all came together.
But
World War II, we all came together.
I always say, all right, well and good. So what's the solution then? Like,
start a war.
Do we just go
start a war?
Yeah. But it's also proven to not be true because if anything this year, you would have thought that
COVID would have brought us together.
A nameless, faceless enemy that's affecting everybody would have brought us together. And it did for like a month or two.
It didn't. It made it actually
and then
made things worse
exploded.
in some ways.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So
we were able to take a virus and somehow faction that off into different political ideologies.
Yep. I'm excited, not excited. Someday in like 20 or 30 years, someone will be able to look back on that phenomenon and write a really good
It'll be
book
a
on
scathing rebuke.
That's right.
That's
it will
what
be.
that's what it's going to be.
Yes, it will be. Yeah.
It'll be a scathing rebuke of our society.
Yeah.
So, he wrote, one of the things that he writes is this, and I quote, "No wonder the newly ascendant American ideologies having to fill the vacuum where religion once was are so divisive. They are meant to be divisive. On the left, the woke take religious notions such as original sin, atonement, ritual, and excommunication, and repurpose them for secular ends." So like cancel culture.
Right.
That's now the culture's excommunication.
Right.
It's like, oh, we hate excommunication. I can't believe churches would do that.
That's right.
And it's like, it's on a national level now.
Yeah, totally.
Cancel culture is excommunication.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or church discipline.
Or church discipline. Yeah.
Applied very.
Except they don't have anything to. The church's purpose is in building someone back up.
Right.
The culture's purpose is in tearing them back down.
It's very sloppily applied church discipline, I should say. Yeah, that was actually my third of four things was this very quote that you brought up. And,
sorry.
No, it's great. It's a perfect segue. He goes on to say, whereas religion sees the promised land as being above God's kingdom, the utopian left sees it as being ahead in the realization of a just society here on earth.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to talk about the right, and it just reminded me of the language you used in a sermon recently about the ghosts ahead and the ghosts behind. Like, if you look at the left, is like we gotta progress, we gotta get there.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the right's like,
no.
Make America great again.
Yeah,
bring it back.
It's in the past. We got to take it back to where it was great. And the left's like, no, greatness is ahead.
And I wrote down next to this, they are ghosts both. And it's like this illusion, this vaporous thing in the future we're trying to grasp at that will never come, and then grasping back to perhaps a heyday that never was, and just goes to show the frivolity of it all. Yeah,
and what's deeply troubling and concerning to me is the amount of language. There are two things that are deeply concerning to me about all of this. Is one, that there seems to be language that actually believes hook, line, and sinker that we're going to be we can make our utopia happen.
Yeah, I know.
Which means, and that's part of the problem of divorcing yourself from the Christian faith and biblical Christianity is if you can't deal with original sin, you're going to constantly be in a state of anxiety because the Bible knows there is no utopia this side of Eden.
Right.
That's the whole point.
Right.
Utopia was lost.
Yes.
Everything here can never be utopia because of the presence of sin.
That's right.
And so if you got everyone in this country to vote left or to vote right, you still wouldn't have a utopia.
No.
You would then have factions within factions.
That's right. Yeah. This is just the way we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. And then the second thing that's troubling is that in order to broker your utopia, there is a lot of performing. Stage acting that's going on in the country. Yeah. In other words, people are acting, they're performing all the time. Politicians, even victims are performing.
Yeah. Well, and it's it's evangelizing with a false gospel,
Mhm.
right? Because you're trying to convince the other side that their way of viewing the world is wrong, but yours is right. And if you looked at the world the way I do, then this is what your life could look like.
Yeah.
Or this is what our life could look like.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
What's the last one?
Yeah. Last one is where he talks about America's God-shaped hole, which I thought was so funny because that's such a church culture, like
it is.
It's like such a
He's using
cliche,
it like it's a new phrase.
That's right.
And I'm like, when he wrote this, I was like, oh.
I know. I started having like
you might as
90s
well
and 2000s
you might as well have
flashbacks.
used the word fellowship in
Yeah.
here or something.
small group.
God-shaped hole.
That's right.
Yeah, that's like.
Where's the Toby Mac?
Hey man,
I love
come
Toby
on,
Mac.
man.
Hey,
that was a low blow.
so let me tell you,
Because I just used Toby.
you
Mac.
did. I thought. Never mind.
Technically, that was
That's right.
edited years ago. But.
His Momentum album, I probably played that album like 200 times, no exaggeration.
All right, then why are you hating on the man?
I'm not hating. I'm just saying
You
he's
did.
very
You took
emblematic
you
of
took a
that
little-
time of Christian history.
You weren't building him up. That's all I'm
I
saying.
love Toby Mac.
All right.
Still, no shame.
All right, no shame. All right, so
Anyways, yes, God-shaped hole,
which for other reasons that phrase makes me uncomfortable.
all right, moving on. I don't feel so bad now.
I'm so sorry to all of our listeners.
At its best, he says, religion confers relief by withholding final judgments until another time, perhaps until eternity. The new secular religions unleash dissatisfaction not towards the possibilities of divine grace or justice, but towards one's fellow citizens who become, and this is super interesting, embodiments of sin. And he uses examples from both sides, deplorables or enemies of the state. And I thought that was so telling of the last 365 days.
Summarize what he just said for the
So basically what he's saying is like, those of us who have faith in God have faith not just in his existence, but his character, which is that he is holy and also just.
Yeah. And
justice is a scary thing, because if he's going to be just for all those people, to all those people out there, he has to be just to us as well, which is why Jesus is such a big deal, because he stood in our place. So we now can look out at a broken world and, still fight for justice, to be sure, still stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, to be sure. But we have the hope that one day our just God is going to make all things right.
In the return of the utopia that was lost, that we just talked about. Yeah,
that's right. But if you don't have that faith or hope in that God who is going to do that, then it becomes placed in our hands to now, seek judgment, seek revenge, which has bred all the things that we have seen rampant in our political and sociological landscape.
And which, what's interesting about that is, like, if you just look at it from the biblical narrative is the Bible says no one is good, not one.
Right.
Okay, well, if that's true, and then you apply that into secular thinking, then it's like, well, then this will never end, because if no one is good, we're going to be tearing each other apart forever.
Yeah.
That's where this goes.
That's the final.
Because if you don't have any hope in this all getting resolved by a benevolent, merciful, redemptive, holy God, and you're going to fight for it now, all right. Well, then the people you're tearing down are eventually going to come for you.
That's right. Yeah. Thus, the current landscape, and really how it's always been, honestly. And I thought he landed the plane in a really interesting way. He goes on to say, political questions are not metaphysical. They are of this world and this world alone.
Yeah. Preach. I highlighted that exact line.
And he quotes a guy who said, "Some days are for dealing with your insurance documents or fighting in the mud with your political opponents or taxes or whatever stuff of life."
Yeah.
And he goes, "There are also days for solemnity, fasting, worship, or feasting. things that remind us the world is bigger than itself. Like,
and man, and that is a good word for
Yeah.
our people who right now is like, turn off the TV, put down your phone, and life and death does not hinge on the politics of our age. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody's listening and you haven't been to church in a long time because you just think it's another institution.
Yeah.
And you know what? In some ways, you're right. But if you find the right church, then it's an institution that knows it's broken,
Right.
which makes it about as safe as you can ask for.
Yeah.
This side of Eden.
Yeah. We know that the answers aren't in ourselves
Yeah.
or the pastor, or we know that we go to Christ for all of that.
Yeah.
And our job is to point one another back to him. So
the church should be full of people who are politically homeless, ideologically bankrupt, and looking for where they can put all of this need to unceasingly outpour.
Yeah, that's right.
What can hold the weight of this thing inside of me? And maybe it's not. Maybe it is in some ways not going forward, not going back, but going up.
Amen.
That's a good place to end.
It
See
is.
you next week.
See ya.